Thank you everyone for coming. This is the Building Brain Awareness Talk series. Today, Dr. Jerrod Brown is going to present about the therapeutic applications of using Lego as an intervention to help people with brain injury. And Jared, I had had a brief discussion about this previously, and so it's a hard topic to discuss, and I don't think that Lego is necessarily the solution for everyone. It's more about learning how to, in my experience and with some other people that I have met over the years with brain injury, you have brain injury gives people specific problems, specific inabilities, or makes things harder to use. It makes the act of doing something much harder. And I found that trying to do the efforts, especially in the early years, over and over with repetition and with kind of building a structure of creating the effort to be what you work to restore is what I found as beneficial. And it led me down a 7 year journey of rebuilding my cognition from the point where, my mom says I was like a toddler after my brain injury. And then I got back into school and I was able to function in that 7 years. A lot of stuff came back, and it was a very strange and very slow process. But I see, um, so I have two kids. I see how Lego could be, you let's say you open the package, you actually have to do that. You have to get the manual, you have to start following the steps. And for every person, I think the brain injury problems are different. But I think that someone can, especially figuring out in the beginning what is hard for you and then learning how to do it, learning how to work on it. I recently spoke with somebody that has his inability or his most drastic problem is reading comprehension. So I could see him trying to read the manual and then apply, step one, step two. My son does a lot of Lego, and it's not easy, especially when you get to like the 12 plus levels. So I think it could be something that a person would apply. And for me, I did this with things in my life, the basics of life, taking a shower, brushing my teeth, getting dressed. It was like doing the steps of it. The circuit, I felt like the process of thinking was injured in me, and it took so long to do, but I repeated and repeated and repeated. So I see someone could be very much using Lego to do that. And the other thing is, I think each person would have different problems because brain injury people have different problems. Another person I spoke to has executive function problems, so maybe planning the Legos or laying them out might be a problem for that person. And the other thing that I wanted to say, and I had said to Jared, in the early years, I was so obsessed with I needed to get my basic abilities back that I don't think I would have sat and done Lego because I would have been thinking, what's the point? I need to get my life back. I need to be able to think. I need to be able to read. I need to be able to do, the things that I had lost. I was 18. I had just started college when I had my brain injury. But after about 4 years of everything being hard and slowly working on things, I think after 4 years, I would have realized that doing something like Lego or some other exercise would have been very, very beneficial. So I've never seen this research. I'm excited to see what Jared has to present. But I think that doing different efforts and working on things will overall and in time generalize to get these other benefits to happen. For me, it took about 4 or 5 years to actually feel things really grow back. And then at the fifth, sixth, seventh year, I was like, wow, I'm actually feeling, like the fluidity of thought came back. And then at the 7 year mark, I felt so much back. I was like, wow, this is amazing. And I've met other people that have had that very slow progression, but I think the effort drives the neuroplasticity. The effort drives the improvement. So in that respect, I think Lego is a great application of that and a great tool for that. So given that, Jared, why don't you take it away? And if anyone has questions, please, ask your questions or put them in the chat. Thanks.
Dan, thank you for sharing that. That's very helpful. Please interject at any point from that lived experience. Folks, please interrupt too. Share what you think. This is a little different than all the other talks I typically give. And I became interested in this topic. It's probably been about 6, 7 years now where I do a ton of work in the area of autism. And the topic of Lego-based interventions did come up from time to time in there. And I ended up taking two online training programs out of the UK. It's probably been like 5 years now. So that's kind of my background with this. And at this point, it's really evolving in how we can apply this to folks with brain injuries, how we can apply it to folks with fetal alcohol spectrum disorder. I'm in talks with folks about that. I'm in talks with groups around the country about how we could start applying this with justice involved populations. This is the fourth talk I've given this year on a different aspect of Lego-based intervention. So I'm in talks with a group too about how do we apply this to working with kids involved in the foster care arena who have profound attachment and trauma histories. So we'll be weaving in a lot here. There's not a ton of empirical based literature on the use of Legos with brain injuries. There is some. There's a ton on the use of this with autism, but there's a lot we can apply to really any population. If you're working with kids, families, or adults, the research says this is applicable to anybody in any setting, face to face, group, telehealth, coaches, therapists, teachers, mentors. This pairs nicely with, I think, any intervention. This pairs nicely with trauma-informed care. It pairs great with OT work, physical therapy, nutrition work, and the list goes on. We'll talk about all this stuff today. Here's my email. Reach out anytime. I got a lot of resources on the topic. Here's my bio. I have a PhD in psychology, 6 master's degrees, lots of graduate certificates, done hundreds of trainings for different groups. And I'm trying to really figure out how can we apply what we're talking about today to working with folks with brain injuries and other neurodivergent conditions, especially when professionals, caregivers, family members get stuck and like traditional approaches aren't working, or maybe they've reached their end point and we need to like think, what else can we do? And that's why I'm doing this. So our agenda today is pretty straightforward. Dan, I know you're recording this. I think you always release these on YouTube several weeks, a month later. So I encourage folks, go back and listen to it. We'll be covering a ton of information in a very short period of time. These are my 3 sections today. I'll part the breaks after each section, open it up to thoughts, questions, concerns. Dan, please again, interrupt me too anytime. So the research in a nutshell on Lego-based approaches says it's probably pretty good to use with neurodivergent populations. There's a lot going on here. What is a neurodivergent population? Well, fetal alcohol spectrum disorder, autism, ADHD, intellectual and developmental disabilities, communication disorders, dyslexia, and TBI does fall under the umbrella of neurodivergent conditions, according to the research. There's other neurodivergent conditions depending on the article you look at, the website, the book you read, but the ones I just listed off are the big ones that you'd want to be aware of. Now, everybody is different with a neurodivergent condition, and I want to capitalize on the fact that when you study like the neurodivergent movement, neurodiversity, we want to be aware of the strengths, all the good stuff that the client is doing and dealing with. But it's equally important. We have to understand that there are limitations too. There's no way around it. But we don't want to just focus on limitations. And what I have found, and I'll show you a couple case studies here too, of actual clients I've worked with. I do think Legos do help bring out some of the good qualities too. And it brings out a lot more happiness. I'm going to show you quotes from actual clients with neurodivergent conditions of what they've actually shared with me when we start talking about the topic of Legos. So associated challenges here, and this is going to vary from person to person, of course, but social limitations. So you want to be aware of like adaptive functioning, social, emotional intelligence, things of that nature. Functional skills, adaptive functioning, like money management, time management, transportation skills, taking meds as prescribed, cooking and cleaning, things like that. Impulse control problems, very common. Emotional dysregulation, common. Attentional issues, not just ADHD, but most folks with a neurodivergent condition probably are going to have some level of attentional limitations in some cases. Memory profiles can differ, learning profiles can differ, and pretty much everybody with a neurodivergent condition will have at least some executive function impairments. It can be very, very mild and subtle, or it could be extremely profound where the client lives in a group home and needs care 24/7. So it's really all over the map. What are the possible signs and symptoms of a neurodivergent condition? Well, it's tricky. It's all over the map. Here's a little bit from the literature, but you see inconsistent profiles. Maybe the client is really on it one day, and then the next time you meet with the client, it seems like you're meeting with someone totally different. Performance can differ. Sensory processing profiles are very unique to this population. And it does get tricky too, because it's not just the neurodivergent condition we need to be aware of. What prenatal factors were at play? What are attachment patterns like? Were there trauma histories? So lots of things to consider. Now we move into the heart here. Lego blocks. Why do we want to focus on this? Well, this is a really nice article that just sums this up nicely. Well, they've been referred to in the literature as magic plastic blocks. Why is that the case? Well, put it out on a table when you're meeting with a client for the first time and see what happens. And you probably will see what I'm talking about. It is absolutely fun to see. And I've worked with clients who are very flat and stoic and apathetic, but then you start talking about Legos, they just light up. I've seen it many, many times. So something to try. And there's no side effects, I think, with this. Again, of course, maybe a client has a tendency to put things in their mouth. There's a swallowing hazard, but that's not going to happen too often. If you do have a client that has that profile, maybe consider getting Lego blocks that are a lot bigger where they can't swallow them. And we'll talk about some of the limitations as well. Pretty much everything I'm talking about is supported in the empirical based literature. At the bottom of my slides is my full citation. I literally have hundreds of links and articles on these topics. If you want all of them, shoot me an email. I'm more than happy to share it with you. What does some of the research literature say about the benefits of playing with Lego bricks? Well, it may help enhance language skills. It can play a role in enhancing social emotional development. It's a great way to promote imagination. This is really, really important for early childhood brain development. And equally important, it can help promote creativity. So from an early childhood development lens, this is great for brain and body development. Equally important, I just want to stress here, if you work with adults only, there are many, many studies that also show adults who play with bricks and put things together like this, it can be very, very helpful. And there's plenty of research that says if you incorporate this into your organization, it may actually help reduce staff burnout, improve performance, decision making, and group kind of cohesiveness. We'll talk a little bit about that today as well. Lots and lots of articles have looked at the use of Lego bricks, and this is a very small snapshot. There's been studies on the use of this within robotics, and there's actually some articles specifically on the use of Lego robotics in brain injury rehabilitation. It's been studied within the context of helping kids and adults manage behavioral problems. Most of this research is geared toward autism originally. Plenty of research shows it can be a great education and teaching tool. It's been used in architecture. It's been used in the energy industry, and the list goes on and on and on. What I will say, and I could be wrong on this, I have never found an empirical based study that has looked at the use of Lego bricks in the criminal justice system. And I don't know why, because I do believe it would be very beneficial. I have never found one empirical based study that has looked at this within the context of fetal alcohol spectrum disorder. I have no idea why. There are a couple blog postings that talk about like caregivers like blogging and saying, yeah, my child with FASD or my teenager loves Legos. And we found a therapist to work with my child or teenager with FASD, and they use Legos and it really produced good results. No studies that I'm aware of. What is Lego therapy? Now, when you see the term therapy, I'm sure you're thinking like mental health provider. Take out the word therapy, put in skills, put in interventions, whatever it is, Lego coaching strategies. We can apply this to any setting, any population, and it doesn't just have to be the professional doing this. The professional can teach the caregiver on how to use this at home. And I'll show you some stuff on that in a few minutes. If you were to go through the Lego-based therapy literature, what does it say? Well, it's a highly structured, predictable kind of toy. It's an active intervention method. It's child-centered. It's a play-based therapeutic activity. It provides structure, direction, and organization. That can be very good. Lego therapy, if you look specifically at this literature, it talks a lot about the use of this in a group-based social skill intervention class, but Lego-based interventions can be applied one-on-one. Peer mediated interventions. So if you were to do a true Lego-based therapy group, you would get other kids involved. Maybe you get like an older, like a teenager in there. You do a lot of modeling and role playing. So you're focusing on peer instruction and peer modeling. This would be a name I would write down. Daniel Legoff. I don't know him personally, but he's the developer of Lego Therapy. He's got a great website, written a book or two, published articles on this. Originally, he really, basically the history here in a nutshell. He's a psychologist. He was working with some kids, I think, on the autism spectrum, maybe had Asperger's at that time. Noticed in his lobby, there was like a Lego set, I believe. I'm probably butchering the history a little bit, but there were two kids sitting in the lobby that don't seem to ever interact with anybody. And then they had some Legos out there. And he came out to the lobby and saw both the kids were playing with the Legos together and interacting. And that kind of sparked an interest in him, like, what's going on here? And he dug deeper and started doing studies on this and all that good stuff. So if you were to do a traditional Lego therapy group, the research says, obviously get some training in Lego therapy, play therapy, and things of that nature. You'd want to be licensed, certified. The sessions last around 90 minutes. And then a traditional Lego therapy group is organized by a builder, a parts gatherer, and an engineer. So everybody in that group has their own role. So they learn basically cooperation, sharing, what it means to have different roles in there. But again, remember, it doesn't just have to be in a group therapy session per se. And the research says, and this is another great article, that why do we want to consider maybe using this as a tool? It's not going to replace anything you do, but it's only going to be a good add-on because it's the flexibility of it is wonderful. Individual, group, it's a social communication tool. It can be done with partners. There's a case that I consulted on where the person with a neurodivergent condition started playing Legos with their partner, and that really helped open up dialogue between the two. It's great for kids with cognitive-based impairments, visual motor disorders, kids who are lower functioning, kids who are higher functioning. So the flexibility of this is one of the reasons why I think it can be applied to the work we do with folks with brain injuries. And if you were to go through a lot of the articles, these are just some of the benefits that have been shown in the peer-reviewed literature associated with engagement in Lego-based therapy and interventions. It can help teach perspective taking. It can teach people how to make apologies. You can teach people how to have more appropriate eye contact and eye gaze. You're teaching people about the appropriateness of sharing, turn taking, cooperation, conflict resolution, motivation. These are good for anybody and folks with a brain injury, of course. A lot of folks with a brain injury or any other kind of neurodivergent condition really can struggle with generalization of skills. What does that mean? Let's pretend somebody with a brain injury goes to their therapist, goes to an office location. They have a wonderful therapist. They're learning the skills in the therapy session. The client is demonstrating to the therapist that they've learned the skill. The minute they leave that therapy office, they can't take the skills they learned in that session and apply it to the bus, the home environment, the lunchroom, the playground, the work environment. Lego therapy, Lego interventions can teach the skills that stick where the client can use it in multiple settings. Here's an actual case I consulted on. This is word for word from this individual. So I asked this person a while ago, well, tell me about your history of Legos. And sure enough, in most cases that I have worked on, the client with a neurodivergent condition likes or loves Legos. It's not going to be 100% of the time, but this client said playing with Legos helped improve my hand-eye coordination, helped me become more patient. It helped increase my perseverance and grit and not throwing in the towel. It was a rewarding experience. It was basically good exercise for the brain. It helped the person stay more focused. It helped reduce the client's worry and reduce rumination. It taught self-management skills. It helped the client get out of his comfort zone, especially following those multi-step instructions. So this is one example of many, and I'll share a couple today.
Can I ask a question about why do you think the generalization factor is something that appears to be the case? Because I would have, when I made, my introduction, I thought there isn't nothing seemed to generalize, but maybe this does, or maybe this has more generalization ability.
Yeah. The research says that Lego bricks are a 3D tool. So that's one of the reasons.
Uh,
The brain will remember things more when you're playing with something and making it visual and concrete, especially Lego bricks that have different colors. So maybe red represents a skill, yellow represents a skill. And the brain of a lot of people with a neurodivergent condition, taking in that verbal information maybe makes sense in the short term, but it leaves them very quickly. If you apply it with a brick and make it visual and you create a story around that, and it helps with storytelling, it helps it stick more in the brain, the research says in a nutshell. Again, everybody's going to be different. It may work better with some, and depending on the brain injury. And like you said, Dan, maybe at first the person's just in early stages of recovery and playing with bricks might be overwhelming, sensory issues and things of that nature. So we have to be mindful of that and individualize it to the person as well. And Lego bricks can be brought home and it can be applied with parents doing the skills over and over again, or a spouse or a partner. So again, you're applying these skills in multiple settings and using that visual reminder and visual tool as well.
yeah, I think that the play factor is a maybe a major reason why it helps so much because I've seen some of that research about play saying how much it helps to learn and helps to have things be learned faster. Maybe Lego somehow like applies across the board or the play of it plus the act of it. But I do think for every person finding that problem and then working on it slowly is the way to improve. Anyway, yeah, just some thoughts.
Yeah, no, yeah, definitely keep them coming, interrupt me. If there are questions we don't get to, I'll stop at every pause and then open it up. So here's one article of some, I'm not going to say several, but some articles have been published on the use of Legos with folks with brain injuries. And again, it really depends on the type of brain injury and a variety of other factors. But the research does support the use of this as an intervention. So if you're working in brain injury rehabilitation centers, it might be another tool to bring in that may lead to some better outcomes. Explore this a little bit too. You can do free play with people. It could be structured, it could be a group. So get creative. The nice thing about this is creativity is kind of a fun thing. I think we all know what a brain injury is. Did we do the training last month on the autonomic nervous system, or was that 2 months ago? I don't even remember. We took a deep dive in the autonomic nervous system, and I do believe that if we were to use Lego-based approaches and make it very rhythmic and predictable, that can be actually very soothing to the autonomic nervous system, which can be, I think, a component of trauma-informed care. And I'm actually putting together a training right now for a different group on the application of this through a trauma-informed care lens. And there are a couple articles that do say, if you work with folks with trauma, this might be a good thing to consider as well. So we know cognitive impairments are the rule rather than the exception for somebody with a brain injury. Every single thing on this list here in the Lego-based intervention literature, there are studies that say it can target any one of these things here. So another reason why we might want to consider the use of Lego-based approaches with folks with brain injuries. Every single one of these on this list here in the Lego-based intervention literature, it also says it can help clients manage emotions more effectively. It can help people make sense of emotions. It is a great way to combat stress and anxiety, and I'll show you some things on that in a few minutes. Dan, I'm going to stop, open up thoughts, questions before we get into making this more.
Is there any questions, anyone?
I'd like to hear a little bit. Hi, Jared. This is Joel. I'd like to hear a little bit more on the processing speed, a slide or two back,
Yeah, yeah.
how that, in that context. Because I was thinking processing speed wasn't, I guess the word would be repairable,
Yeah,
but
can it
maybe,
be completely repaired? I don't know, depending on the individual, but I think it can be improved on. So I'll give you one example. This is the most profound example of a case I consulted on. Adult female on the autism spectrum, worked with some providers a few years ago. They would ask her a question. Because of her slow processing speed, she literally would not respond for 45 seconds to a minute. Nobody knew what was going on. They just thought the client was being difficult or didn't want to answer. But as we dug into the weeds, it was a slow processing speed thing. Professionals who don't recognize processing speed may follow it up with rapid fire questioning or even get frustrated with the client, thinking, why doesn't this client want to pay attention to me? Take a step back, be curious in those moments. It could be the brain has a traffic jam and the brain needs more time to make sense of the questions being asked. How does Legos help with that? Less words is a good thing for slow processing speed. We want to reduce the bottleneck and the traffic jam in the person's brain. Having the Lego brick there as a visual, and maybe you're okay sitting in silence, allowing that person to put together a few bricks or fidget with the bricks gives their brain time to slow down, to make sense of the one question being asked at a time. The last thing we want to do is talk quickly, have complex questions. We want to be aware of our vocab and we want to be aware of multitasking. Multitasking, that when I say multitasking, clients on their gadget, there's a lot of background noise, that kind of stuff, not good. Multitasking when the client is sitting there in silence, playing with some Lego bricks, that's a good thing. And the research does show that may help the client then process that information and then respond more effectively and to be able to take in the information and make sense of it from a skills building standpoint. Joel, I know you're an expert on a lot of things. Feel free to share your thoughts
no,
too.
that's really encouraging because I was just in the mindset that processing speed was just what it is, right? But I'm guessing this is a repetitive process and you haven't got into explaining the process of the bricks in conjunction with story or the therapeutic side of it. So I'm anxious to hear more. No, that's really exciting. Thank you.
Yeah, glad you're here, Joel.
Can I share, for me, the term processing speed is, in my experience with my brain injury, the only therapist that I was able to talk to and have some connection with would talk about the processing speed and the cognitive endurance. But I learned how to feel the process itself and what was injured in it and what were the problems with it. And it was the taking in of information and the execution of a task and the steps and the gears of thought, actually getting it to work, actually getting it to happen. And so the outside world was seeing the slow processing speed, but I could feel the problems with the process itself. And in this talk series, I have a few other recordings where people actually share what they are aware of in terms of their cognitive issues. And as a result, we look like we have slow processing speed, but it's because of, each person having different actual processes injured, made harder to use. And I could share that talk with you. And recently I did a podcast with a woman, she's MD, PhD. Her and I both had our severe brain injuries when we were 18. And she has executive function in terms of planning and this overview of what she's doing issues, but I had very specific cognitive issues in the sense of getting a train of thought to happen, getting the sequences of events and getting the gears to happen. So her and I like debating, discussing, but we both were misunderstood by the outside world. And I think processing speed was looked at by the outside world, but it's like there's a bunch of issues within the process. And then she talks about how through her PhD in med school, she learned how to problem solve. She learned how to get the cues that she needed to figure it out. And then she's a pathologist. She completed both those things, but processing speed is indicative of the processes itself being injured, and that's I think where we really need help and understanding because um yeah, in my experience as a patient, I was like, they don't get that it's not the slowness, it's the process itself, and then working on it for years improved it.
Thank you.
Yeah. I'll
Dan.
share that podcast with you. I'll just put it in the link.
Thank you.
Keep them coming, folks. More we can learn from everybody here. Anything you want to share? Is anyone using these approaches in the work you do, or anyone had any other thoughts to share with the group?
One more thought. I have an interesting recording with a woman who had multiple brain injuries and was basically abandoned by her family, but she got with a support group and she was talking about how the brain injury support group really helped her. And she describes the act of like making beads, like stringing beads, and the hand, like she had problems with using her hands and the hand-eye coordination and the act of it, and she just improved from it so much. And it's a really sad story because what that support group provided for her gave her the ability to improve a whole lot, but that was many years after she had been abandoned by those who could have supported her. But the way she describes that task reminds me of Lego, reminds me of a small building blocks working on it and then progressing and feeling the improvement.
Thank you, Dan. All right, so let's make it practical. Let's get the bad stuff out of the way. So the research on Lego therapy does say small sample sizes, the methodologies, the designs differ from study to study. But in a nutshell, the research is very, very promising. You have many, many, many studies published on this over several decades now, books written on it, multiple training programs out there. And I could be wrong on this. I've never seen a training program dedicated to the use of Lego therapy, specifically with folks with brain injuries. A lot of it is autism based, which is great, but it's equally important, I think, to start applying it to folks who've had brain injuries after birth and prenatal forms of brain injuries too. There are limitations we need to be aware of. So let's say if you want to start a group or a Lego program, these are very minor in my opinion, because we can do these things remotely in telehealth too. But the research says, well, be aware of the location. We want to be aware that maybe you're working with some clients, they don't have the means to purchase these things or obtain them. So there are different programs around the United States that have actually written little short articles you can find online where they've overcome that by putting a call to action out to their community or local church groups or things of that nature. And people donated bricks. So I don't think that's going to be an issue. Cleanup is a factor. So you want to make sure, obviously, you disinfect the bricks, things of that nature. And then scheduling conflicts. I think most of these can be overcome pretty easily, in my opinion. How do you want to start a Lego program? Well, get some training on it, of course, and determine your focus. And some literature says there's 5 key steps to starting a Lego program. Well, identify the location. Are you going to do a group, individuals, at an office? Is it telehealth? Secure a nice supply of bricks. You want to recruit participants and make sure you really know your target population. What's your agenda? What are you trying to accomplish? Are you incorporating a mix of activities? And there's many activities you can find out there and resources. And if you're looking for ideas, just Google, give me a list of intervention strategies for Legos. You're going to find worksheets, handouts, things on YouTube, Facebook. There's so many different things out there. Maybe it's a speed building activity, maybe not appropriate for somebody right away with a brain injury, but over time, maybe that helps strengthen some cognitive muscles. Is there a particular theme you have? Maybe it's based on a movie. Are you doing it individually or collaboratively? How do you structure a session? Well, maybe you start out with brief introductions by giving everybody, all right, the first 5 minutes, here's your pile of bricks, build something, whatever you want. And then when you're done, let's share it with the group. It's a great icebreaker. It's great for building skills. And again, generalizing it beyond the session. Maybe there's some quick challenges and you use a timer. All right, you got 4 minutes. Build me this or that. Maybe there's a variety of building activities where you have something up on the wall and, folks, replicate what you see up there. Or maybe it's a real life scenario. Tell me about a time when you felt your happiest. Tell me about a time when you experienced some tough emotions so you can use it for positives and you can use it for negative emotions. And the research does say this is very good for helping people process painful emotions. There's some literature that says this can be helpful for depression, anxiety, and grief and loss issues as well. Great article found on the Lego Corporation website. And this is called Better Gaming Routines. So I know, and you know, that a lot of folks seem to have problems with excessive screen time exposure. How do we reduce excessive screen time exposure? Getting Legos involved. You got articles, you got protocols out there that actually talk about smart gaming use, online kindness, and this would be a great little article to use. Any families raising children, adults, teenagers that seem to have a problem being on their screen too much? Well, get Lego involved. It might help. Any of you working in a school setting or even college setting, doesn't have to be a K through 12, but a college setting. Nice article that talks about just some basics to consider if you're working in a school environment. And if you really want to approach administration, hey, I'd like to start a Lego club. I'd like to start a Lego intervention. These are just 6 basic things to consider. Any of you working in community settings, here is a nice article that gives just some basic structure to starting a Lego group in a community setting. This could be a church. It could be at a therapy center. It could be at an after school program or whatever it is. And you can tailor this. The nice thing about this, it's not locked in. Get creative. Find what works for you, the clients you serve, your organization. Just some helpful reminders. I'll send my slides to Dan when I'm done. And I know he always gives slides out to everybody. What are some general rules? And again, rules can differ. This is a nice article that provides just a little structure about if you were to start a Lego group or a Lego program, these might be 8 rules to maybe utilize in your therapeutic process, whatever you're doing. You could modify this to what you're doing. Talk about this in your advertisements. Talk about it during day 1 of your Lego program. Just some very helpful reminders that I think is very common sense. But if you break it, You have to fix it or ask for help. So you're teaching people already. It's okay to ask for help. If I'm stuck, ask for help. That's a great skill that some people may struggle with. If someone else is using it, don't take it. Ask first. So you're teaching turn taking. You're teaching collaboration. You're teaching patience. Build things together. You're starting to teach collaboration and working together rather than in isolation. You're teaching people how to model appropriate voice kinds of tones, which is a struggle for some people. Keep hands and feet to yourself. So you're modeling and teaching body awareness. You're modeling and teaching the use of polite words. You're teaching people how to stay organized and clean up after themselves. And you're teaching people do not put Lego bricks in your mouth for safety concerns. So these are all great rules, but you're also teaching great skills. I put this together just thinking about if you wanted to start a program, words do matter. So if you call it a therapy program, maybe that would draw in less people in some cases than if you call it a skills building program or a club. But be aware of your target audience, how you're going to market it, what your intended goals are, and just think about the words you might want to use in an advertisement. And you can go online and Google this, but you can find many programs around the country that advertise, hey, I'm starting a Lego-based group. It's going to meet every Wednesday night via Zoom, or it's going to meet on this day in person. So get creative.
There anything in the literature that talks about sometimes Lego building can be very frustrating when a person is trying to build but not getting what they want, or especially in the beginning if you can't even connect the blocks, or I don't know, I've seen this a lot with kids, and I had tremendous frustration in the early years of brain injury. So I imagine the two can coincide. So how to deal with the frustrations that can happen.
Really, if you're let's pretend you're focusing on a group for individuals impacted by brain injury. I think it would be important before you put everybody into a group, maybe really dig into, is a group experience appropriate at first? So doing some one-on-one discussions, review the records, collaborate with the person's referral source. Maybe they need a little more one-on-one coaching, learning some basic skills before going into a group. So really individualize it, dig deeper, and just don't assume that everyone's appropriate for a group at first because there's a lot of layers and nuances to this. Maybe the person has some hearing or listening deficits. Maybe they have profound sensory issues, and just being in a group can be very overwhelming. Those are some things you'd want to consider at first. Know your audience, screen. Maybe it's not the best approach at first. Maybe it is. Dan, what do you think?
Well, that's an interesting answer because that's looking at the managing of a group and kind of how to coordinate a group. But I think that part of dealing with the frustration of I'm trying to do A and B to get C, and when it doesn't happen, you just like you get so frustrated. So I think there may be some tools to help a person do that, and I guess that's what I was kind of looking for. I never found any tools for it. I just would get so frustrated and then breathe and then try again. Maybe the breathing and collecting yourself and then trying again or getting help for what is wrong or what is not working. But yeah, because the frustration is part of the learning process, especially when you can't get things to work the way you remember it used to being before a brain injury. Um, if anyone has any thoughts, there's something in the comments, but yeah, any
Dan,
thoughts?
and I mean, some of those things can be way more managed one-on-one at first to really
Yeah,
learn
yeah.
about the
Yeah.
client's triggers. And, you start processing through it, teaching that person, this is not a race. We don't have to get this done in 1 hour. We can chunk it out. We can take breaks. You can stand up, go for a water break, and all those things. In a group, it might get a little more tricky, especially if there's a lot of time and structure around it. But
Right.
one-on-one, the beauty of it, flexible, adaptable, and you're not locked into a really tight schedule either. And maybe if the client does best in their home environment, And you could do it telehealth, and maybe going to an office is anxiety provoking or trauma producing in some cases too. So
Yeah,
tailor it to the client's kind of history as well.
and someone commented about the emotional regulation involved in that. I absolutely think that's part of the process of I look at learning after a brain injury as relearning, rebuilding, regaining, redeveloping, because a lot of these things you had. So there's a lot of frustration to progress. Yeah, I guess this is a good application or way to work through that with a person.
Modeling, coaching, role playing, and teaching that to the client, it's okay to be frustrated. It's okay to be upset. What do we do with that? How do we channel that? How do we verbalize? How do we be aware of our internal cues before it reaches that point? And you can use Legos to teach all of those things. So Lego-based interventions, great for improving cognitive brain-based abilities. Cognition, we all know probably what it is: memory, learning, language, visual, spatial skills, executive function. Very, very important. It really drives the bus with probably how we do in life. There's a million things that can adversely impact our cognitive brain health. What we eat, smoking, sedentary behaviors, high depression, metabolic issues, diabetes, the list goes on. So just know there's a lot of things besides a brain injury that can impact our cognition. How does Lego therapy promote positive cognitive skills? Let's break it down. Well, by being able to identify the bricks by color, size, and shape, that's a great cognitive skill. Learning how to create a tower with the largest bricks on the bottom and the smallest on the top. So you're starting to use those fine gross motor skills. Maybe you're matching bricks to a picture. You're looking at a picture and then you're matching, comparing and contrasting, strengthening abstract thinking abilities. It can help with counting. Great. It can help with sorting. It can help with following directions. Where do all these things come into play? Well, jobs, schools, relationships. You can apply this to everything in our day-to-day life. Lego interventions can also help teach improved problem-solving skills. There's empirical-based literature out that as well. This is one problem-solving model out there. I just wanted to plant the seed. Most of you, I don't know if you've heard of this. It's just very common sense. But if you're trying to tackle a problem in your life or with anybody, this is just a good thing to think about. SSTA. So you're teaching people how to stop a little bit more, put the brakes on, slow down. If you're facing a problem, we don't maybe need to solve that problem instantly. The more we can slow down, we calm our nervous system down. It allows the dust to settle, and it gives the client more time to tap into the skills they previously learned. And if we can do that, we tap into the client's thinking, and then they can be more planful, and then they can act more accordingly. Easier said than done, but I think if you pair this with Lego-based interventions, it should lead to better outcomes. Anybody dealing with inner problems? Well, if you're a human being, you probably got some inner problems. Anxiety, depression, grief and loss, negative emotionality. Playing with Lego blocks and games gives people that free space to maybe slow that mind down, tap into those inner problems, make more sense of it. There's a multitude of factors that can lead to poor emotional health. Alexithymia, burnout, confusion, body pain, fear, trauma, sleep issues, digestive health problems. The more you can understand these moving parts, then you can get into the weeds with your clients. Okay, what are all the drivers here that are contributing to my client's poor emotional health? Anybody dealing with loneliness? Loneliness is an epidemic in the United States, the research says. Well, Lego-based interventions can help reduce loneliness according to the literature. Getting people creating things, doing it with other people face to face or through telehealth can help combat loneliness. Back to the screen time use. Here's another article that talks about if you can move your kids, teenagers, and adults in the direction of reducing screen time exposure, getting off their gadgets, TV, movies, things like that, and playing with Legos, it may help improve attention span, hand-eye coordination, interpersonal skills, collaboration, the list goes on. Why do we want to care about screen time exposure? Well, it's a threat to human health. It's been linked with more heart problems, autism-like symptoms. People without autism who are on the screen for excessive periods of time can actually look like they have autism when in fact maybe they don't. Maybe they're just completely zoned out on the screen. It can impact language. It can cause obesity. The list goes on. Dan, I'll stop there, open it up to questions before we get to our last section today.
Sorry, I'm trying to unmute myself. Any questions? Any thoughts? Anyone? I had a thought about a podcast that I did a while back with a woman whose her problems were I guess gating noise. Outside noise was so overwhelming and she couldn't separate it from what she was trying to pay attention to and focus on. And she learned how to she did a therapy where I don't know all the details, but she describes in the recording we did, she's trying to sort pennies and listen to music and do both at the same time. And slowly she learned how to put the music in the background. So if someone had a sensory issue, I imagine they could play with Lego with a background noise, with a background activity, and then it would be a process, but it's a slow regaining, relearning, rebuilding process.
Yep.
Question in the chat. Are kids with autism drawn to Legos? A friend has asked.
Yes. Research says yes, that's why Legos are so helpful for folks with autism because they love the colors, the simplicity of it. And go back to that slide on that I showed you on the benefits of it. And that really will sum it up. And there's some wonderful articles published on that very topic that do say, yeah, folks really are drawn to Legos.
I think it's important also to distinguish, I don't know what the outside world views of the different neurodivergent populations are, but I believe that Braintree is relatively different. So the perspective comes from looking at what the other groups talk about, and I feel like it doesn't fit with Braintree. But I think the application of the tool, the use, almost the exercising with play is what can benefit everyone. But I do think Braintree people are, at least in certain ways, different than those other populations.
So practical tips for Lego-based learning, just some different things to consider. Again, it's flexible. Start small. Follow instructions carefully for maybe some people, and get rid of that. Who cares about any instructions one-on-one? Have it a free flow and see what happens. Be okay with mistakes because you're building something that doesn't have to be pressury. Celebrate the successes, make it fun, pair it with good stuff. Work as a team, work individually. If you want to move in this direction, well, here's a few skills and knowledge areas I would personally recommend you start learning about the literature on, learning some basics on emotional regulation, communication skills, goal setting, social skills training, some basics on play therapy. I'm not asking anyone here to be a play therapist. Turn taking literature, problem solving literature, some good stuff on all this out there. Any of you in life coaching, or you're a mentor, or you're a teacher, there are articles that talk about you can use this in life coaching and make it a visual approach. It's a communication tool. It's a hands-on approach, and it's a really good thing. Why do you want to use a coaching approach? Well, in my opinion, push back on me, folks. I think coaching approaches are probably more helpful than deep insight-based therapeutic approaches. Because coaching approaches, you're coaching, you're modeling, you're teaching, you're making it specific, you're role playing. For some folks with a brain injury or another neurodivergent condition, you go to a therapist, maybe they don't have a lot of training in the condition, and they ask a ton of how and why questions and deep feeling questions. That might be very tricky for some people, especially if they have alexithymia and they can't answer those questions about emotions too well, or abstract reasoning deficits. Strengths-based coaching, you're just basically doing coaching approaches, but you're capitalizing on the strengths, person-centered planning, motivational interviewing, trauma-informed care, things like that. Maybe you have clients that have a lot of social anxiety or they don't know how to start a conversation. Good articles that say you can use this as an icebreaker activity. Maybe it's a job and you have a lot of new people starting. Use Legos in there to bring the anxiety down, and you just starting with a nice, helpful, safe icebreaker activity. And again, this is another article that just says the beauty of this, it's very flexible. It can be applied in the home, in a clinical setting, at a school. This is good for anybody, but the more we can have a growth mindset, playing with Lego bricks and strategizing and learning new things when using Legos is very good for all of us, including our clients. And the more we can have a growth mindset, it's great for neuroplasticity. Collective intelligence, if you haven't heard this term, this is a really good thing to be aware of. Lego-based approaches are great for enhancing collective intelligence. This is collective intelligence in a nutshell. Learning how to address complex challenges, working on a team. So it has a lot to do with team building, decision making, group collaboration. This is great for people that want to get a job, go to school, because we have to learn how to interact with other people and work on a team environment. This would be good, I think, for a teenager who wants to join a sporting activity, but maybe they really struggle interacting with peers. Couple articles, and I mentioned I'm putting together a training right now on this very topic for a different group. How do we combine Lego approaches with trauma-informed care? And I'm also going to incorporate the first 1,000 days of life research into this training and attachment theory. Think this is great for kids in the child welfare arena. We all know the goals of trauma-informed care. The more we can all become trauma-informed, our clients feel more heard, valued, known. It feels safe. We're really focusing on practices that don't re-traumatize the person. And then we're really focusing on interventions, approaches that really promote healing and recovery. Individually, if you want to move in the direction of really becoming trauma-informed, empathy, compassion, understanding gratitude and optimism literature can be really helpful. Post-traumatic growth. These are all components of trauma-informed care practice. Anybody working with folks with anxiety or stress-related problems? Well, here's a really lovely article that gives you some good tips on how to use this with folks with these kinds of challenges. And any of you doing cognitive behavioral therapy, a couple articles do say you can pair this very nicely with CBT approaches. Anybody working in a mental health arena and you're asking yourself, well, I want to implement this into a mental health treatment program. Couple things just to consider, and you'll have my slides, of course. Couple other things to consider just from that mental health lens, but you can take out mental health and put in any field of study here. But again, it can be very, very free-flowing. Sessions could be 30 minutes, could be an hour. Start simple. Don't make it overwhelming or complex. Maybe you start out every session having the person then put something together with Legos, you talk about it, and then you move into something else. Or maybe you end the session where the client just feels really anxious, worked up. Have them put together some Legos with you and talk through it a little bit. Maybe that calms them down and it transitions them to the end of the session, and then they leave there feeling more regulated. You have clients with a lot of emotional problems. Use this article for an idea. Build a Lego emotion house. You're putting together, you're having the client build like a structure, and you're representing the structure with different colors, and they're talking about their emotions. Here's another really good article that you could use that gives some structure and guidance. This is for kids, but you can use this with adults too. If you have folks that struggle with emotions, negative emotionality, or maybe they struggle with expressing emotions at all, try a Lego house. It might open up the door to some more dialogue and healing. You want to build resilience in people, and resilience is a good thing. Our ability to bounce back from tough stuff. Using Legos can be very helpful in building resilience by teaching people how to learn from their mistakes, helping them become more patient, enhance problem solving, become more adaptable, and celebrating achievements. Here's a little bit about resilience. If you want to promote resilience in yourself or others, this is what the research says. A lot going on here, but I'll send my slides to Dan. You'll have these in the slides. And why do you want to care about promoting resilience? Well, it's a protective factor against depression, anxiety. You want to combat sleep issues? Well, promoting resilience can be one layer of that. PTSD, which is a very common comorbidity among some people with TBIs, substance misuse, the list goes on. Enhance resilience. You want to teach people how to be more patient. Using Legos is a great way to teach and model patience and get people to slow down. Here's a little bit about teaching patience, giving you some more tips. We all struggle probably at times with being patient, but these are some very practical tips. Provide visual cues and reminders. Legos can do that. Make it a fun experience. Engage in reflective listening. Coach, model, role play, start small. Just wanted to plant the seeds here. I'm actually putting together a training on this as well. Maybe Dan, we could look at this in the future. The use of therapeutic jigsaws, puzzles. So maybe you're opposed to Legos for some reason. There's some wonderful empirical-based literature that says use jigsaw puzzles with clients. That can also be very, very good. I give a lot of talks on neurocounseling. And in there, I have one slide I always talk about neurocounseling through a jigsaw puzzle lens. Playing with jigsaws and putting them together, puzzles on a regular basis, the research says it might help improve short-term memory, greater attention to detail, mood improvement, collaboration, teamwork. Like the growth mindset, here's another good article that just says playing with Legos encourages lifelong learning. That's good for anybody. Using this in your workforce too, if you're a trainer, you're owner of your company, whatever role you play, you can actually incorporate Legos into your workforce, and it may lead to enhance focus and creativity among your staff. It may help your staff reduce stress and increase positive staff satisfaction, which could reduce burnout. As we get ready to wrap up in just a moment, here's some of the benefits according to the literature. We've covered pretty much all these today. Why, hopefully, and convince all of you to really think about this, dig deeper into it. Lego-based approaches, great for a growth mindset, great to teach conflict resolution. It's a great way to teach flexible thinking. It's a great way to enhance resilience and patience, and the list goes on. And if you need a little more reason why you might want to consider this, lovely article published in 2024 that talks about if you engage in Lego activities, it teaches 10 valuable life lessons: emotional intelligence, resilience, problem solving, embracing diversity, teamwork, project management, innovation, good for any field of study. And Legos, as I mentioned before, is a 3D storytelling tool. That's why it helps with generalization. It's great for role playing and teaching communication naturally. It provides measurable results according to literature. It benefits people of all ages, and it can really transform playtime into a really positive learning activity. Thanks, folks. Sorry we went over a little bit. I'll stick around, Dan, if we have more thoughts, questions. Here is my email address. I appreciate all of you.
Thank you. This has been helpful.
You're welcome.
Thank you, everybody. There's a question to throw the links to the citation. Um, well, I'll get the slides from Jerrod. I'll send it to everyone who's registered today, and those have all the citations, I believe. So I can
Yep,
definitely
at the bottom of the slides. Yep. And
Yeah.
shoot me an email if you want an extended list too, folks. I have way, way more I could not get to.
If you have any questions, please just talk. Jerrod, I wanted to share some thoughts, and this came up in the lifestyle medicine lecture, which that's the one I'm gonna put out next, and also that autonomic nervous system talk. I still have to get that out. But I think trauma with brain injury, one important feature to it, which is for every brain injured person, there's specific things that have become harder to use, damaged, injured. It's a physical injury to the brain, but this process, or for every person I've interviewed and talked to, and in my experience, certain things are what is hard for that person, while other things would be their strengths. And learning and understanding that for the outside world to learn and understand that about each person and to be open-minded to that struggle that the person is dealing with, I think would be a big factor to help resilience because the resilience, if you're stuck and no one gets what you're dealing with, resilience is a lot more grim. The will to want to keep trying becomes much less, and having people understand those aspects of you. That's why I do the Experiencing My Brain podcast, which is brain injured person, what are you dealing with? And everyone so far has been able to explain to me what they're dealing with, and they're really different, but they have a similar injured brain injury part. So I think being trauma informed would include that, especially for brain injury.